So we are here. This is the April virtual panel. This is our third virtual panel for the CAR-PGA. My name is Mike Tresca. I am your committee chair, and I'm very excited to welcome Fenway Jones to our virtual panel today. We have lots of interesting things to talk about here, so I'm very excited. Fenway has done some great work and has continued to do great work. We actually have spoken previously. I've done an interview, which I will link to in the summary afterward, but we have lots of things to talk about. It's very exciting. Before we do that, I just wanted to check here and look at our sort of overall business with the CAR-PGA in general, just checking with entries. So I've been, as you know, you may know, I've been attempting to expand our base by inviting more folks into our into the committee and to the organization. I think it's really important that we grow the network, and Mike has joined us as well. He is one of the new members. He was a speaker last month. And we've gotten quite a few other folks, so I'm pretty excited to see Dave is joining us as well, to see that we've actually got 2 more members that are real, because we also in the feed sometimes get folks that are spam. But I'm happy to recognize Robert Aducci. Robert and I have been connected for a while, and Jeremiah Kaplan. So welcome both of you to the membership. David, I will give you their names and emails. They registered right at the end of the month. So that's 2 more members. And I just wanted to welcome them and thank them for joining. And I think that's, David, Ted, you don't have anything else for housekeeping? Ted says no. David, you're good?
Yep.
Okay, good. So with that, we will talk to our guest, Fenway. So Fenway, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And we've talked a little bit before, so this isn't our first conversation, but I think it's important for 2 reasons. One, the topic of mental health awareness, which we will discuss, is obviously always relevant. And 2, there are events coming up, both very recently, including probably one that you can talk about right now, and in the future, that make this conversation timely. So Fenway, are you the creator of Jasper's Game Day?
Yes.
What's the phrase? The creator. So creator and founder?
Yeah, I use creator and founder and executive director.
And executive director. Just a few different hats. So Jasper's Game Day is I broadly, and I'm not doing it justice, is obviously tied to mental health awareness and support, and using gaming to help do that. And I think that's a huge opportunity. We have talked to both members as well as the CAR-PGA itself. That's part of our mandate, is to support both the spread and amplification of role-playing as a tool to help, as well as support the members, right? So I think there's 2 opportunities there, and Jasper's Game Day, which is more than a day, I think does quite a bit in that space. So super excited for you to be here. I think we'll start there, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your gaming background and a little bit about what Jasper's Game Day is and how it came about?
Sure, I'll start with my gaming background. So I started playing Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons when I was 11, and I started with my dad's group that he had been playing with since he was in high school. So they kind of brought me in under their wing and started me on my gaming career. At 13, I started dungeon mastering and have been DMing ever since. That's where I started with that. At 14, I unfortunately lost 2 friends to suicide, and that's where Jasper's Game Day started from. I lost them within the span of a couple of months, and I wanted to be able to use the pain and the grief and just the poor feelings that I was experiencing in that time to be able to create something positive, to put positivity back into the community. One of the people that I lost, his name was Jasper, and he was my gaming partner in crime. his uncle is my dad's best friend, and so all four of us went to conventions together and played weekly. So the Jasper's game day is in honor of him and to kind of fill the void that I saw in suicide prevention and gaming. And so that's where Jasper's game day came from. It is now a 501c organization, and we raise money for suicide prevention and awareness, specifically crisis hotlines and crisis centers, and a lot of it through the American Association of Suicidology through gaming. And that's kind of what we do.
That's awesome. And so now you started dungeon mastering young. What I'm always interested because like I know Mike's on, he's sort of similar to me. Like some of us, I think we can't do anything else. Like we can play, but we have the DM sort of spirit. And I feel like you're the same, Fenway. Like what was it that appealed to you as a game master? Was it something just immediately, or you sort of took to it over time? And what was the attraction to that?
So my dad was one of the local coordinators for Adventurers League when those things existed. And so he was basically in charge of, in our area of Michigan, getting some gaming stores started with Adventurers League, the organized play Dungeons and Dragons. And so we were at a gaming store and we were starting up their Adventurers League program. And one night, after a few weeks of only having about one table of players, including myself, it became a 10-person table. And so the next, we left from there, and he was like, "Well, next week you're DMing, so let's get you ready."
Trial by fire, literally. And how did that go?
I can say it probably was not the best game I've ever run. But it was fun. People seemed to enjoy it. I was 13 and didn't really know what was going on, but I think people had fun. At least I did.
That's great. That's great. And one of the things I think, especially when you're talking about mental health and concerns about suicide, is dungeon masters tend to be the organizers of the group, and they tend to see things that maybe players may not see. So in some ways, part of the challenge of a dungeon master's role is they are a lot of times the social network of the group, and they are the ones who potentially see some of these either signs or concerns or awareness of their players' sort of well-being. Certainly, I know that was my role, right? Which was I was sort of the center hub for a lot of my other players as they kind of came in and out of the game, because part of it is you need to know what they're doing so you can schedule when they can play. And if you play at their house, you certainly get an insight into their life. So it's interesting because I think people underestimate the difference of role-playing games versus sort of a board game. I always say, if you want to play role-playing games, it's like, what are you doing for the next 3 years? So, we're gonna meet every week or two times a month or once a month for the rest of your life, But conversely, what that means is you are very aware to players if they're in crisis or what's going on, because it totally affects the game. There's no way it doesn't. Whereas a board game, not that board games don't go on for a while or there aren't board game clubs, but I imagine board games, it can sometimes be more transitory. So it's great to see that. Sorry it was trial by fire, but I will say that you are certainly not the first and won't be the last person to become DM, because they were like, I don't know, somebody needs a DM. Guess it's you. You seem capable. And I think that's wonderful that you came into that. So obviously Jasper's passing was really upsetting. And I think it's wonderful that you sort of turned that into something so positive. So how did that come about? I mean, was it sort of you saw the resources, or did you have a plan, or how did you get? Because there's a big leap between, man, I want to do something, and all the work that you've done. So how did you get there?
So it started with my mentor Satine Phoenix and we were going to do a game day, but it wasn't, well, it was more of a question and answer, a Q&A with Satine Phoenix is what the idea started as. And she was going to Zoom in, and we were going to have dungeon masters at our local game store be able to purchase tickets and ask questions. It's Satine Phoenix, and that was what we were going to do for the event. And it kind of sort of, grew quite a bit and created a game day. In our first event, we had 14 tables running for 3 slots a day, plus 2 different panels. So, it was quite a bit, and it was a lot of fun, and I wouldn't have changed it in the world.
That's amazing. I'm a huge fan of Satine. That's fabulous. And Satine's done massive work for the industry, just raising awareness, I think, as well. So that's one. I didn't know that. That's wonderful. Yeah. So then it grows, right? So this sort of, I imagine this is starting to grow on its own. And so Jasper's Game Day was originally, it's in the name, a day. Was it a specific day, like a repeating day? Was it one at each convention? How did the day work?
So the first Jasper's Game Day was a couple of days before the anniversary of Jasper's passing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I had mentioned, it was in remembrance of him. It was in honor of him, trying to raise money for suicide prevention in his name. And after that, we got so many requests to continue doing it. We moved it to be in the Mental Health Awareness Month, as the family of Jasper asked for not to have it around the day of his passing, and not to mention his last name, due to the fact that they didn't want the press and
Sure.
the questions to go along with the events, but they loved what we were doing, so we decided to move it to the Mental Health Awareness Month.
Right. And as a refresher, Mental Health Awareness Month is
May.
Is in May, right? Okay.
Yes.
So so now are the game days only in May, or are they spread out beyond that?
So it really depends. Our main game day or game week is in May. So this year it's April 30th through May 11th. And so it's not really a day anymore. It's more of like Jasper's game, little over a week. But we do events. We work with conventions throughout the year. Like we do a lot with Baldwin Games. So we go to Winter Fantasy, Origins, Gen Con. We work with Gary Con and hopefully Gamehole Con this year. So we do events all across, usually the Midwest, as that's where kind of our reach is at the moment. We do online events all over the country and the world as well.
Wow. So how are these events? So these events are money to raise awareness, or how does that, what is the goal of the days or the week themselves?
So both. We do, most of our goals are fundraising goals, as we have funded different projects. One of the projects that we just funded was one so that a counselor could go into the homes of the people who had just lost someone to suicide and counsel and just be there to talk to the siblings, talk to the parents, and be there for like the couple weeks afterwards, so that the siblings are 10 times more likely to die by suicide if one of their siblings has already died by suicide. And so we funded a program to try and help assist people in those situations. And so a lot of our events are fundraising based. We do a lot of community pushing and resource distribution during the events, but fundraising is our main goal.
So I can only imagine that, as much as this is obviously a conversation about awareness, there are people who have discussions with you about their personal situations that there's, because the topic is relevant at the time. So that's, first of all, that's got to be hard, because it's a little bit of, I don't know, it's just a lot of weight on your shoulders or anybody else organizing it. How do you manage that? I mean, I imagine you get a lot of sort of personal stories of, either I'm concerned or I have a concern about myself. What do you do?
So that is the reason that it started with my dad and I getting the Safe Talk trainings, which basically tells you how to listen to and talk to someone with suicidal ideations or is showing signs of thinking about hurting themselves. And then we went through and got our whole board of directors, board of advisors, and all of our ambassadors trained through LifeWorks or Living Works, sorry, which is a company that does similar trainings so that we can have the people who are representing us know how to do that as well. And so the first couple of events were definitely very challenging, as I had people coming up to me during the entire thing, telling me about their stories and telling me about who they lost and their attempts and all of those sorts of things. And one of the things that I find very helpful is detoxing after events. And not that I mean that the events themselves are toxic in the sense of detoxing. I just don't have a better word for it. So I just take a week after most of my big events to go up to my grandma's actually and take a week, just play board games, watch TV, hang out, and be away from social media mostly and most of everything that's going on, so I can take some time to process stories and process what's going on.
Absolutely. And that makes, I mean, I think that's for anybody dealing with that level of trauma in any field, role playing included in this case, makes sense. And I should point out that Jasper's Game Day has a resources page that has a lot of those really helpful links and tools. And it's wonderful that it's international even. So there are resources online that anyone can look up. And I'll make sure we reference that when we do our summary, which is great. It brings up a really good point though, which is role playing often, because it's role playing, anything's possible. So some of these subjects are possible, including suicide, used all kinds of ways, theatrically, whatever, not necessarily trying to traumatize someone, but I know a lot of times they can be callously used as a topic that someone may not be familiar with. Have you dealt with, there's been a lot of talk of safe spaces and how we sort of make sure players are comfortable. Is there sort of ways that you manage that with both the games that are run or advice on how to run them, particularly if there's people who have that kind of trauma?
So with Jasper's Game Day, we try to keep it as family friendly as possible, as we want everybody to be able to watch. So all of our games, the content has to be PG-13 or below. And we have, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the terms of lines and veils, but the term line means you cannot talk about it whatsoever in the games, and veils is you can kind of fade off into the background after mentioning the subject. So our lines at Jasper's Game Day is you cannot talk about anything regarding suicide or self-harm. You cannot talk about anything hurting children or doing anything that could be any remotely bad to children. And you cannot talk about anything sexual. And so those are our 3 lines that we include in every game. So no game will include those if it is a Jasper's Game Day game. And that is to keep this space as safe as possible for everyone, especially those who have been traumatized, who often come to our games because they know that we are a safe space, because they know that we keep those subjects out.
Right.
So that's our main goal there. I was writing an adventure with someone, and it's not published or anything. We were writing it, and they had put in at the very end that the main villain had died by suicide in front of the characters. And they were about to put it out, and I was like, I can't have my name on that.
Yeah,
that's not something that can happen. Like I had gone through the adventure, and then they put it in after I went through it.
Oh boy.
And so, that was a hard situation to deal with, but keep the brand of Jasper's Game Day and my own brand, which is regarding mental health. Like I'm a can't think of the word, but I talk about mental health safety, and I try and make sure that my space
Right.
is as safe as possible. Um, so I can't have that adventures that I am.
Totally understand. As an advocate, maybe is one of the phrases, but yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the word I was
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah, and it's interesting because where this gets sticky is horror games, right? So I think I'm currently running a game that's very inspired by I'm allowed to say a certain theme park ride. Let's put it that way. Hopefully I won't get to. No, I'm joking, but it is it's sort of based off the Haunted Mansion. But when you start talking about ghosts and stuff, you're talking about people dying. And it is one of those things that it brought up a really good point, which is you do when you start doing that kind of conversations. I think communication is obviously really important, and as you said, the lines and veils and any of those mitigating tools to make sure the people at the table are comfortable. And I think that was a big controversy when it came out. Hopefully, less so now. But when you're running campaigns, convention games, I should say, with large amounts of people who aren't necessarily friends, who don't necessarily know each other, to your point, it sets a safe baseline so that you know what to expect. Because we know there's stories. I'm sure you hear all the kinds of horror stories too, where someone either misjudged or just didn't care and put something in as meant to shock or surprise that was very upsetting to someone with personal experience along those lines. And hopefully over time these become less of an issue. The other thing I would say that I think I wonder if you're seeing this. Do you feel like the more diverse populations we get who are starting to play, the more diverse experiences, which means we have to care about things maybe that people didn't think about before. Have you seen, because there's people from all walks of life joining now, that it may have been 20 years ago or 10 years ago, hopefully not 10 years ago, that people just didn't worry about that as much. And now, because we've got people from all walks of life with all kinds of experiences, that, yeah, you do need to think about this stuff.
So I definitely agree. I think that getting people from all walks of life, you do get a lot of different experiences that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that because Jasper's Game Day is so new, we've only been in the works for about 3.5 years. Um, we haven't necessarily seen that change. Like, we started with the idea of we needed to be diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And so we definitely started with all of the different um, walks of life. Obviously, we can't control who's at convention tables or something like that, but we make sure to diversify our like our stream tables.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of our main concerns, is making sure that there are people of color, there are LGBTQ folks, there are people from all the different minorities at these tables. And obviously, sometimes a table slips through the cracks, and there's one or two that might not be as diverse as we would like, but it's definitely something that we care about, and we do notice that different walks of life apply to the lines and the veils. On the topic of the horror game that you had mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that in our kind of streams, with horror games, we require to have a session 0 with the players,
Mm-hmm.
and then we will always put a trigger warning on the stream that whenever they come into the game, the watchers, viewers will have a trigger warning that is like, this is a horror game. If anything is bothering you, please, we will not blame you if you leave. We will not, like, all those sorts of things. And but at the same time, we can't keep every notion of someone dying out
Right.
of all of the games.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a character will die, sometimes an NPC will die, and it's story driven. So we can't necessarily keep every mention of someone dying out of the games.
And is there, we always sort of use Dungeons and Dragons as the baseline. I'm assuming there's other games you're running. So there's all kinds of ways the games deal with that, right? So some games may be narrative and you don't sort of die unexpectedly. There's a conversation we just had on N World recently, this past week, where Lou Pulsifer, who is a very he created a bunch of monsters from the Fiend Follow. He's written so much for Dungeons and Dragons in the past, but he talked about how there's character backgrounds, right? So now Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, if I'm saying that right, that latest book has a background generator. I think it was Tasha's, unless it was no, it was Xanathar's. Xanathar's, I think, had the background generator.
It was Tasha's.
Was it Tasha's? Okay,
Yeah.
I have both, but I they're blending together because they both say of everything at the end. But what he had said, the point he made was, do you make a lot of character background, and then you roll D&D? You know, you have 10 hit points, somebody rolls, and your character dies, and then all this investment emotionally that you made sort of is really devastating when the character dies. Or conversely, do you start with a character who's really a blank slate and you call them Bob the Elf? They play, and then maybe when they get to 5th level, you go, okay, well, actually, his name was really, you know, Dizenzius the Elf, and he's actually this, and here's his background, because now, by the way, the story told me through playing, I've developed a character. And one of the balances I think that happens is both for the game master as well as the game itself. Some games will encourage longevity, because if you're investing in story, it doesn't help to, you know, cancel or otherwise harm the character immediately, and then all that work was for naught. Conversely, I think a lot of people project onto D&D sort of really interesting narrative sensibilities, but hopefully then the characters aren't dying because you roll poorly. So it's really an interesting challenge, because I imagine that level of character death does get dictated by the game that you play. And have you seen, do you end up with a preference for games? Is there any game that anybody wants to play, or how do you approach that?
It's really up to the DMs. We kind of give the DMs, obviously we give them the PG-13 warning and all of our, like, the rules about what can and can't be in a game. But kind of the level of brutalness of a game, we don't really control that. We just, like I had mentioned, we just want to make sure that the players know beforehand.
Right.
So if the adventure is going to be very brutal, then they're going to want to be told. One thing that does end up happening is we do something called Tiltify Rewards. And so during the game, the viewers can donate to affect the game that is going on. And so the dungeon masters get to control which Tiltify Rewards are available, but sometimes they will put in there add a monster, you know, wild magic surges, and things of that nature. So, you know, there's a lot of capabilities that the viewers have to change the game as well. And
Right.
so sometimes the dungeon master will just come up with a loose story and kind of bank on the Tiltify Rewards, because our community is very appreciative of the Tiltify Rewards, and they use
That's
them
great.
very frequently, loosely. So
I love it. And I imagine it also is different first level characters versus higher level characters too. And but that certainly, to your point, probably makes combat a little swingy based on what kind of awards, monster or player. Is it all towards the monster, or can the players get boons too from Tiltify?
so we do disadvantages and advantages for, they are often there for both the DMs and the players. The viewers of our games typically like to lean towards the disadvantages. They like to cause as much chaos as possible. However, it's all in good fun, and most of the players, if not all of the players, know what's going to be going on. And the only reason a player wouldn't know is if they weren't checking, you know, our Discord or the emails. And
Right. As they watch people cheering on for whatever havoc is going to come. So that sounds like so much fun. So Jasper's Game Week's coming. Can you talk a little bit about? I know that's a big deal, right? So this is not sort of a small event. This is actually pretty big. What can you talk about sponsors or any other big pieces of what's coming?
Sure. So I'll kind of go through a little bit of the schedule, and then like what channels will be on, and and whatnot. So the first 2 days, April 30th and May 1st, we will have 4 games. So we'll be running 13 hours on Dungeons or D&D Beyond, and so their channel is what we'll be kind of starting off the week with, and then we go to a channel called Mini Terrain Domain for 5 days, and on the 6 days we added another one, and for the opposite end of those 6 days, so the off hours, the non-US hours, will be on a channel called Ardent Roleplay in Australia.
Wow.
So it'll be actually it's like 21 hours. We'll have like a 3-hour break for those people who want to sleep or something like that. I don't know.
Sleep, whatever that is.
And so for those 6 days, there'll be 4 games on Mini Terrain Domain and 3 on the Australian channel. And then so that goes from May 2nd to May 7th. And then May 8th, 9th, and 10th, we are on Hearthsinger games, which we are going to be running our Pathfinder and Starfinder games on. So the D&D Beyond games are all D&D. And then the Mini Terrain Domain and the Ardent Roleplay games are a mixture, mostly D&D, but also a couple of other games that are being kickstarted during that time, or we were running a game of Vampire the Masquerade in the game of Cthulhu. So, lots of different games involved. And then the last day, May 11th, we're working with Penny of Retail Arcade, and they are running an adventure, the new Kickstarter game that they're doing. And then we're working with the person who created Melee Ball, which is a sports D&D. It's a sport that uses the rules of Dungeons and Dragons.
And that's isn't that kickstarted right now, or was just kickstarted? Was that?
Yes, it ends in a couple of days. Yeah,
that's great. I love that idea. That's fantastic. I mean, you have so many. I'm just looking through the list again because I haven't looked recently. There's so many guests. Can you speak to any of the people you have as sort of guests here? Because it's just amazing.
Sure. There are a lot of people that we have involved. So we have people from Critical Bard, Justice Armin from Beatles and Grimm. We have Satine Phoenix, Mark Humes, Deborah Ann Wool, Todd Stashwick, Anthony Rapp. We have Adam Bradford, Todd Kenrick. There are a lot of people that we have involved. I could go through the entire schedule, but there's 65 different games, and I'm not sure we just want to hear people read off names for 10 minutes.
No, that's totally fine. That's what the website's for. Yes.
Right.
That's amazing, though.
But we also have a sponsor for currently about half of our games. Obviously, we are looking for more sponsors to sponsor the rest of our games, but then we have our partners. We currently have 12 partners, and so that's super exciting.
So, and what's involved in a sponsorship?
So the sponsorship is we have a couple of different levels, and then they get their logo on the games they sponsor, and they get to have a blurb about their company or about whatever they are sponsoring with before the game and then after the break of the game. Because our games are each 3 hours, and so we usually have our groups break halfway through for the sponsor and buyout breaks.
Right. And sponsorship is money specifically, like a flat amount, or how does that work?
So sponsorships, we have our 3 levels. We have 250, 500, and 750, depending on which game and time they want to sponsor, and it can be donated in cash or product, or a mixture of both.
That's fabulous, right? Now, speaking of that, so are you looking for product? I'm always I've got stuff. Because I do dice reviews for Amazon, I literally just I'm drowning in dice. So I'm always curious, what for people, because I imagine people have. I don't know that you want dice, but you probably do take donations. How does that work?
Yeah, we take donations, definitely. So it depends on who's how they want to do it. So we can pay them to ship it out, or they can ship it to us and we'll ship it out to the winners. And we usually do them for either raffles or Tiltify Rewards or giveaways during the event.
That's great. That's great. Oh, I see. So you sort of take it and then repurpose it back out to the community, basically. That's fantastic. Wow. This is a huge organization and effort. You must be exhausted after it's and then it doesn't sound like it ends. Does it end? Just keep going to the next one?
Not really. Not really. I will say it's not as intense after May. We have a lot. We don't do any more 11-day long events after May. That's kind of our one large one. We do conventions and we have an August event typically that we have in the past called Jasper's Game Day Online. But you know, most of our Jasper's Game Days have been online in the past couple of years. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So to that point, obviously the pandemic has put a lot of stress on mental health. I think in a lot of ways, role-playing game has stepped up. That's one of the reasons that, you know, obviously we're doing this virtually, but I think there's definitely been sort of challenges and opportunities that have arisen as a result of this unprecedented level of sort of lockdown slash, you know, impairment of, you can't just move around. You have to be concerned about safety and conduct. Now, but Jasper's Game Day was running before that happened, right? So what have you seen differently in terms of both mental health support and sort of gaming support with the pandemic?
So I will say that mental health probably was not as, you know, seen as important previous to the pandemic. I say that with quotes because it was always seen as important with our crowd, but it was grown in popularity of raising awareness and you know, reaching out to your friends, those sorts of things since the pandemic, due to the isolation, due to the growing amounts of depression, those anxiety, stress, those factors. And I, you know, our events, we've definitely gotten a lot more like requests for events since the pandemic has started. Obviously, we have not been able to fulfill all of those requests due to the fact that we can't go places currently. But we do incorporate as many people in our online events as possible. And we do have noticed that we've been able to include a lot more people in our online events as we can, it's a lot wider reach due to like somebody in, say, we have a lot of people in Australia. They couldn't just pack up their bags and go to the US, most of them anyway, and attend an event in Michigan for a day. But they could go to their basement, go get on their computer and Zoom in for an event online for a day. That's a lot less time and effort. And so the online events, I think that's the only good thing that we've seen come out of the pandemic, is the fact that we have been able to be connected with a lot more people and have a lot wider reach due to our online events.
Yeah, and I think I would agree. I mean, certainly I know if you look at Roll20, some of the other virtual platforms, the amount of virtual gaming has massively, exponentially increased to the good, right? Both players finding other players, gamers finding other gamers that maybe not have realized they were out there, people trying role-playing games that probably wouldn't have, but now because of the awareness and the accessibility are definitely doing it. But certainly we're all eager to sort of get back at some point to the in-person. So you are actually, speaking of in-person, can you speak a little bit about what you're doing? You're live from somewhere. Where are you and what are you doing?
So I'm live in Florida currently, which I will put out there. We are still wearing our masks. We haven't gone anywhere except for the grocery store. Like we're still keeping social distance.
Good, thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Yep.
But I will be going to the American Association of Suicidology's National Conference in Kissimmee, Florida. and
Wow.
or as the Floridians call it, Katemi. And I will be giving a speech there about community and building a community, especially in gaming, and how I have done it previously.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
When is that?
and it is April 22nd.
Oh
So a
boy,
week from today when we were filming this.
that's great.
Um,
I assume that's going to be recorded so we can see it. I
mhm,
hope. Excellent.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I can absolutely send links over.
Please do. Well, I'm rooting for you. We all are. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. No pressure. I mean, gosh, that's
Yeah.
great. That's fantastic. And so you you are going to be with other professionals, I'm guessing, that are sort
Mhm.
of talking about this topic. So I assume you also come back with some other things too from the other organizations to share, that which would be great to hear. I'd love to
For
do
sure.
a follow-up with you just to see what you learned.
Absolutely, come back with a lot more friends, hopefully.
Yeah,
Although I will say a lot of people are online for this convention. There's very
yeah.
limited capacity. Besides, mostly the speakers are going to be in person, and a couple of the major members of American Association of Suicidology or AAS are allowed to be there, and so it is a very limited capacity convention. Um, and masks are required. I always like to point that out. I'm not being irresponsible with the pandemic.
I couldn't imagine someone who works on all the wonderful things you do. I couldn't imagine you be anything else but respectful and thoughtful of the whole situation. I appreciate you pointing it out. So we've talked a lot. I really do appreciate you just giving me coverage of this, and I think we covered most of the bases. Was there anything that you wanted to discuss that we didn't touch on?
Yeah. Excuse me. So there were a couple of things that I forgot to mention when
Yep,
talking
go
about
ahead.
the schedule of Jasper's Game Week. Um, so we are running our own. It's called PopCon. It's Paizo Organized Play Convention. It's for Pathfinder and Starfinder,
Mhm.
and so we're running that through our Discord. And then we're also working with the virtual D&D weekend with Baldman Games, and so money from all the tickets and those sorts of things will be donated to us. And I finally got the privilege to announce that we will be having one of the adventures from the new Van Richten's uh, uh, Ravenloft book.
Wow.
It's the House of Lament. We'll be having that at the virtual D&D weekend, and I am super excited about that. And
Very exciting.
yeah, and we just started. We're going to be announcing it later that we are working with Start Playing Games, and so those people who want to do online games that are not organized play are very much welcome to go through Start Playing Games.
That's awesome, man. That's really exciting. Because when does Van Richten's come out? It's not even
Uh,
out yet, right?
it's June.
Yeah. So this is a real sneak preview before it comes out officially. That's amazing. That's unbelievable. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm very excited. Now I'm really excited. I'm a big fan of Ravenloft. I've always been a big fan of Ravenloft, so
Mm-hmm.
that's great to hear. And obviously Wizards is supporting, so appreciative of that
Yes.
as well. Which
Mm-hmm.
is great. Anything else before we open it up?
I don't. I think that's all I wanted to kind of throw out there.
So, what I see there's an ambassadors program, right? So, as an individual, what can individuals do to sort of like, so not orgs like us, right? Not sort of groups, but sort of a person who goes, I want to help. What ambassador may be a level that's higher than they're expecting, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So our ambassador program is for pretty much anyone who streams. And so that we currently have the program not open yet, where we have 20 ambassadors currently, and we're working on kind of getting those organized before we start adding more.
Yeah.
But next year, 2022, we will be adding more ambassadors to our list, and that is for anyone who streams. And there's a couple of qualifications that go through that, but they're not hard. You don't have to have any specific number of followers or anything. It's just your passion for working with suicide prevention and wanting to support Jaspers and bring their name to more of a because a lot of our ambassadors work with video games or Magic or Minecraft, all those different types of things, and because we don't have a large reach outside of role playing games.
Right.
But we also have a Discord. The link is on our website and Twitter. And the Discord, we have games on there that we would love for you to come run games, love for people to come play in them. And there's a lot of different opportunities for support there. And of course, through our website, any of our events are on there. If you want to participate in them, that'd be great as well.
That's great. And I know we touched on this in the beginning. So you probably do get people coming to you. The timing was not intentional. So, and Mike knows this. So my friend Joe passed away, not from suicide, but definitely unfortunately, it was sort of a situation of neglect. And today is his birthday. I didn't know that, except for the fact that Facebook told me, because unfortunately his page is not set up as memorialized, which we're going to have to work on that. But it did bring up a really good point, which is, again, I think we mentioned in the beginning, people have spectrums of concern for health, right? It's not just necessarily only suicide. It's maybe I'm worried about a friend who's in a situation. What do you say to someone who comes to you, which I'm sure you hear all the time? I don't know what to do. I'm worried about either myself or someone else. What's the number one thing you tell them?
I tell them, just check in on them. Let them know you're there for them. Mm-hmm. Like it goes a long way to tell someone that you notice that they're not themselves and that you want to help. Now that doesn't always include giving them solutions. It just often includes listening, letting them know that you're a shoulder to, an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry if needed. Mm-hmm. And something else that's really important that I learned in the Safe Talk trainings is being upfront and kind of bluntly asking an open-ended question of, I see you're doing these few things. Mm-hmm. These few things are often done by people who are thinking about suicide, who are thinking about hurting themselves. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Is mm-hmm. this something you're thinking?
That's helpful.
Very powerful question.
Yeah. And like I said, I can imagine that certainly even in games that I've played in, the topic wasn't even relevant. I've seen signs, right, where it comes up. So I imagine, given the topics that you and every volunteer probably comes across this. So that's very helpful. And I know there's resources on the site, as we mentioned, to direct people appropriately. So we're in the last 10 minutes. I always have more questions. We could talk. Fenway, you're just a treasure to talk to. I could just do this all day, but I will open it up. Ted, Dave, or Mike, if you have any questions, if there's anything you wanted to ask, I will give you the floor. I'll give you a second.
Hi, Fenway. I'm David, and it's a pleasure to meet you on the last month, and then to hear all of this today. I'm very excited about the work you're doing, and I know Mike will send me links to the website and things like that. But if there are elements like the ones you were talking about for volunteers, or for playing, or for supporting, or as an ambassador, to focused web links or research materials that you're aware of in this whole huge area of expertise, I would love to gather those together so that other readers of the newsletter and members of CAR-PGA and beyond can know about them and access them too. So anything targeted or resources like that would be fantastic. And if you wanted to discuss any of them now, that would be great. Or an email with links is always fine too. So
yeah, I can do a little bit of both. One place that I always direct people to is AAS, which is where a lot of our donation money goes to. And they have on their page a list of signs of suicidal behavior and a list of things that you can do when interacting with different people, different groups of people. So students, members of the LGBTQ, people of color, like there are a lot of different resources that they have on their website that are helpful in how to respond, how to react, how to, recognize them. That's kind of the three things that I always, you know, uh, tell people to do is recognize, respond, and react is the, my 3 R's of suicide prevention. So,
Great.
yeah.
And to
Thank
that
you.
point, I'm sure you'd be great. We'd love to have you write an article for the newsletter too, if you're interested.
Sure, I'd absolutely love to do that.
Especially even if you want to talk about, yeah, I know David's like, yes, we're always looking besides Mike, someone besides Mike writing something. But especially if you want to talk about even maybe after the event, either the game week or just to reflect on it, I think we would welcome any of your, not that you have anything else to do, but if you should find free time, we would love to sort of amplify what you're doing and also, give you an opportunity to sort of in a space that's very receptive for sure, share what your perspective. I think that would be great.
Sure, I always have time to get the resources out there, so I'd love to do that.
That's wonderful. Okay, we won't make you do it. We will just ask politely and then check in a couple of weeks. But thank you it's very generous of you to offer. Any other questions or any other from our members?
Sure. This is
go
Ted.
ahead.
And you may have already talked about this, and I just didn't catch it. I don't know. But you do a lot of activities at conventions, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so you're running games mostly, right?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever like set up seminars? Like a lot of conventions will have discussion panels and things like that about these issues, or for that matter, maybe you're getting the convention organizers to allow you to have a room for like counselors to be there if anybody at the convention needs help right there at the convention.
So we definitely tried to do that. So that was one of the things we were working on before the pandemic hit. But I have been part of quite a few panels that have been talking about that. We have never, I'll say never. Usually we don't have seminars that regard that during our events. But we do try and make the information as available as possible, and we would love to continue to have that available going forward.
It's a great idea. Just, more resources if you have them, right?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Best, do you have something?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna ask the obvious question, which I think Mike, you already mentioned. You have links to your site and how people can get involved and donate, sign up for the conventions, all that stuff. I assume that's standard.
Yes, that is. It's all on our website, and our website is really easy to get to. It's just jaspersgameday.com.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
And that's a good
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
And it's a good reminder for the social media roundup. Where can we find you?
So I am on Twitter at Fenway the Teen DM, and then also on Facebook as Fenway Jones, and then Jasper's Game Day is on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as all 3 of those.
That's great. And what was the Twitter again? Because it's different from the other. Your Twitter.
My Twitter is Fenway the Teen DM.
Fenway the Teen DM.
Yes.
Got it. Yep.
And then Jasper's Game Day is Jasper's Game Day on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Excellent. You are so amazing. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with everything that you've done. Thank you so much. I'm privileged that you've joined us. I think it's fantastic. I think in probably another year, you're gonna be so popular. This will be like, oh, I don't have time for these kind of.
No, never.
I'm teasing, but the amount of work you're doing is enormous, and the level of support you're getting is it's one of those things that until you see on the website, like I'm not doing it justice. People have to go. And we will definitely emphasize that after recording. So this is a huge opportunity. It's only up from here. I absolutely wish you all the best. You are doing wonderful work. And I really just, from the bottom of my heart, as someone who has had that kind of, unfortunately, which I think many people have had experiences with players that are at risk. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. It really means a lot.
Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. And I love being here with you all.
Oh, you're great. Everybody's great. And with that, we will, I think we'll stop the recording and we will pick it up. I will send out all the information as much as I remember it. And then Fenway, you can keep me honest and the things I may have forgotten. I have some of it already. And we'll put out all the notes so everyone who wasn't able to join will be able to catch up. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.